Aisha Graham, and we're interviewing Dell Partridge.
First question?
Our first question is, what were some of the popular cars during your teenage years?
During my teenage years, in the 40s and 50s, there weren't any Japanese imported cars, and there were three automakers, Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, and each one of them had 3 or 4 models, and so those were the favorite cars.
Were you caught up in Beatlemania?
No, I was grown up and married and had children and had been in the military for almost 10 years, or over 10 years actually, during the Beatle times. And I really didn't care for the music at the time, and it wasn't until years later that I had some appreciation for the Beatles' music and began to enjoy it.
Okay. What do you recall about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and did your family have a bomb shelter?
Again, I was married and had children, and I'd been in the military for a long time, and we didn't have a bomb shelter. And I remember the Cuban Missile Crisis very well. It brought us to the brink of another world war and an atomic nuclear exchange with Russia. And fortunately for us, President Kennedy stood his ground, and Russia packed up their missiles and went home.
How did people react to the Berlin Wall being torn down?
People reacted very, very favorably. There was great celebration and cheering in Germany and in all of the communist bloc countries, and people in the United States viewed it very favorably.
Okay. Who is your favorite president and why?
Well, my favorite president in history, of course, there's several favorite, the founding fathers, of course, but in more contemporary times, I liked Coolidge because he was a small government president, got the debt down to 0, had a balanced budget, believed in small government and states' rights, and those are the things that I believe in. In my lifetime, my favorite president was President Reagan.
Okay. What was your opinion of the government during Watergate?
The government was complicit, if you're speaking primarily about the executive branch, in that President Nixon, much to his discredit, tried to cover up the Watergate break-in, which was unethical and dishonest. And he would have been far better off just to say, these people worked for me, I had no knowledge of what they did, but they were my troops, and they did what they did, and we'll let justice take its course. And he should have done that. On the plus side, Nixon did some good things. He ended the Vietnam crisis and did it with reasonable honor. And I think history remembers some of the good things he did. But he definitely made a very, very serious, dishonest blunder when he tried to cover up Watergate.
Okay, how did you feel about the JFK assassination, and people around you, how did everyone feel about that?
Well, everybody thought it was a tragedy, there's no doubt about it. We've had only a few assassinations of presidents in the history of our country, and it's just, I don't know how to describe it. I happened to be in Washington, D.C. The day that he was assassinated. I was on a flight from Naval Air Station Pensacola to Washington, D.C. I had an assignment in the Pentagon, and so I went to the funeral, and I was in Washington when all of that was going on. It was a national tragedy.
Mm-hmm. In the Vietnam War, where were you stationed, and what was your role and stuff there?
I was in the Navy. I was when the war started, when it really broke out and became a hot war in August of 1964, I was assigned to the American Legation of the United States Naval Attaché in Athens, Greece. And when it broke out, I went to the attaché, who was my boss. He was the Navy captain. And I asked him to release me from my responsibilities at the embassy and get me assigned to an attack squadron that was going into combat, which he did. He was very happy to do that, and proud that So I volunteered for two combat tours in Vietnam. I served with an attack squadron. We operated off an aircraft carrier in the Tonkin Gulf, and we participated in high-tempo combat operations against communist insurgent forces in North Vietnam. And I'm happy to have done it. I would do it over again. And Vietnam veterans have gotten a very, very bad rap. The actual information produced by the Veterans Administration and the Association of Vietnam Veterans refutes most of that. We weren't a bunch of drug addicts and baby killers and things like that.
Like this was during like civil rights time and stuff, so how were some of the Black American soldiers treated during the war?
I wasn't around with Black American soldiers, so I can't really say, but I was, the Navy was an all-volunteer force during the war, and we had a lot of blacks, and they were treated as well as any other sailors. I don't recall any significant prejudice, or any prejudice for that matter. It wasn't tolerated, and everybody got along and worked well together.
How many family members do you have, like brothers and sisters and everything like that?
I was an only child. My parents divorced when I was very young, and I was raised by my father, who was a Navy Chief Petty Officer.
That's really cool. So during the war, like the Vietnam War, how old were you, and like did you have your wife at this time, or were you still?
No, I'd been married, and we had all of our children had been born. And the first time I went to Vietnam was 1965, and I left my wife home with a 6-week-old baby, a 3-year-old little girl, and a 7-year-old little boy who promised me that he would take care of his mother and his sister and his little brother, and he did.
So did you like write letters back to them a lot and everything
I
like
wrote
that?
every day, and sometimes it wasn't very long because we worked long hours. We had 19-hour days every day, 7 days a week, no days off.
Wow.
What kind of things did you do during those hours?
Pardon?
What did you do during those hours?
Well, you had just in the aviation world, you had a ton of things to do, but primarily it was intelligence briefings and the preparations for the flights and debriefings, and then you had your regular work to do, whatever you were assigned to do. So most of the people in the air crews in my air wing flew 2, sometimes 3 missions a day, and we were on a 2-hour cycle. So that meant you spent easy 18 hours. You usually got about 5 or 6 hours sleep and then did the same thing over again.
How did the war change how did experiences in the war change your life?
Well, that's hard to say how any experience really changes a person's life, because those things are gradual, and the sum total of who we are becomes the creation of all the things that happen to us and the things we learned in our lifetime. So that's hard to say, but I didn't have any post-traumatic stress syndrome or any of those kind of things. There is an adjustment when you come from a combat environment back to being in the civilian mode again. But, people adjust, people conform and do what they need to do.
All right, we're going to do more general questions. Did you have a favorite TV show?
I used to really like Laughing. I thought that was really funny. And I remember there was a show with a guy named Ben Casey. I think it was called Ben Casey MD. And it came on, I think it was 9 o'clock on Thursday nights. And it was kind of funny because there was a pilot that was shot down from one of the air wings that we were with out there, and he was tortured, and the Vietnamese Japanese wanted him to tell them of some officers in his squadron that were sympathizers with the communists and against America. And so finally, he said, yeah, the squadron flight surgeon, Dr. Ben Casey, and the squadron air intelligence officer, Captain Dick Tracy. You know who that is, do you? Captain Dick Tracy was a funny book character back in that era. And Dr. Ben Casey was this TV show guy. So,
what was your favorite like singer or band?
I liked, and I still do, I like the big band music, and I liked progressive jazz. Kelly and I, my wife, we used to go to the Palladium in Hollywood, and whenever Les Brown was there, Les Brown and his band Renown, and we'd dance, and they used to have dances at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium, and we'd go there and dance. It was a different area. People wore suits and ties, and the women all dressed up, young women, they were not much older than you guys are, and they slow danced, and sometimes we jitterbugged.
What were some of the big fast food places or restaurants?
Didn't have any.
Really?
No.
Mostly at home.
No, we would go out, but there weren't fast food chains. McDonald's started about that time, and there was a company called In-N-Out Burger. You heard of it?
Yes.
They started in a little town east of where we lived called Baldwin Park. They started in 1948, and I went to the first one of those they had. And then there were McDonald's around, but very, very few. But I do remember their hamburgers were awful, and I think they still are. And they were 15 cents.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
Was there any like unique hobbies or anything that you guys did
Hobbies.
as teenagers?
I didn't have time for hobbies. I was really into sports. I was a distance runner on the track team, and I ran on the cross country team, and I was a surfer, and I worked a full-time job, so I didn't have time for anything else.
I guess, okay, just last question. What was probably your favorite memory of being in the service?
I have so many really, really good memories. The young men that I was with in combat in Vietnam are extremely close to me, and we're just very, very close. Kelly Miner, her oldest son and I went to, when we lived in Florida, we went to the commissioning of a VFW post and the naming of a VFW post. And they named the post for a really, really close personal friend of mine who was our squadron air operations officer in 1968. And he was shot down and taken prisoner of war and died as a prisoner of war. And they were naming this VFW post out of him. They named it the Commander Randolph W. Ford VFW post. Randy's middle name is Wright, and he's the great-grandson of one of the Wright brothers. And so they named the post after him. And Mark Miner, her son, said to me, you guys were hugging each other, and I saw, and it chokes me up, I saw tears in your eyes. And I'm closer to those people than I am to anybody else in the world except my wife and children. We were brothers in arms.